So welcome to part 2 of Your Questions Answered about practicing. This is where we talk about frequently asked questions and also some of them more broad and some specific questions regarding the notion of practice and how that fits into this process of becoming better musicians for ourselves or for our families.
When do you start teaching your students how to practice? I like this question.
Yeah. When did you or when should you? Those are
Yes.
Learning. I think I am very much I like to help a lot. I'm a very present person on the front end. This is something that's been more difficult for me. I have seen parents that are very natural at this instinct, and I had to learn a little bit more by compulsion. It's more out of necessity. I went through some health issues last year, still addressing some of them, but it was the first time in my life that I was put in a position where I could not do all that I was doing.
Right.
And so it kind of compelled me to think outside the box. It wasn't until that need was there that I was compelled to try another way. So I started with the visuals and the checklists and delegation and involving a community of help, which you've helped me a lot in the past with my family. I appreciate that so much, but I think it wasn't until I saw the need for it and how important it was for our family to even think about trying to make that work. So I think it's just recognizing how important it is as a life skill for your child, for your student, for your, to learn independence with anything, just like you would teach your child how to feed themselves with utensils without spoon feeding them. That same important transition, the same thing applies to music. And as far as the when, it is very student specific and what their needs are.
Yeah. And, there's it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Right.
As a practice parent or just even as a teacher, as you're coaching students to learn to practice independently, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can even say, I want you to do this portion of your practice by yourself. Or I'll tell my students, like older students who are practicing pretty independently, they have something very specific. I'll say, okay, your mom is your boss on this one thing this week. They're going to come in and when you're practicing this one thing, just to check in, to just make sure that this one thing is going to be, okay.
Right.
And so they're, I think sometimes we think, oh, they're either going to practice on their own or they're not. But it can be this wonderful, in-between thing where they do a lot on their own and occasionally they need help or vice versa. Maybe they need a lot of help, but there's some things that they can take charge of,
Right.
And I think that's important too. And when do you start teaching your students how to practice? I mean, I'm training the parents from day one, how to do it. And then I'm hoping that the parents are transfer that knowledge onto the students. But this is an interesting thing that I've encountered recently with transfer students that I've been thinking about. I'll get transfer students who are playing, at a pretty high level, and they come in and they audition with these beautiful pieces, and I'm thinking, oh, look at how successful they are.
Yes.
And I assign them something a similar level, and they struggle so much, and then I'm like, oh, they don't know how to practice.
Yes.
And so then we're doing a lot of remedial practice. I shouldn't say remedial, but a lot of practice coaching.
Yes.
At that point, teaching them how to go through and actually practice their pieces. With these transfer students, having to sit down and help them relearn how to practice. So yeah.
Right.
Anyway, we all need it at different times in our life, and maybe you get it when you're young, but you can still learn it as an older child.
Absolutely. So, absolutely. Yeah. So as far as the idea of individual practice, I will say that it's okay, I think so far, to have a piece of music for a different kind of growing experience that requires that help, but to also have a lot of the maybe simpler things to create that independence, maybe separated from each other. A lot of times you see that in the Suzuki realm. So that's something that I've learned to embrace.
Yeah. That's exactly how I set up and structure lessons with my students, where they have easier repertoire that I know they're going to be able to master quickly on their own, and then things that maybe they're going to need a little bit more support with. Right. Yeah, I love that. It just helps everybody to feel good about themselves. Right. The parents to feel like, okay, we're not just sitting there practicing 100% of the time, and the students to feel like, oh, there are things that I can accomplish on my own, and they keep growing, and it's this great balance that you have to find. So
I love it.
Okay, this is another great question. How can non-musician parents help support practice?
Yes, this is actually, I've thought about this, and everyone I've had many people approach me and ask me whether or not I'm a musician to kind of determine the reason behind my children and their success. And they learn that I am a musician and they say, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like as if that, and there is some truth to it because of how involved I've been in the past.
Right.
And as I've learned what the priorities on how to eventually provide that independence. But at the same time, there's plenty of wonderful professional musicians that we enjoy listening to. I think Hilary Hahn came from a family of parents with non-musician parents, and many other musicians have grown from that. And so there are ways to nurture that. It might take a little more creativity, initiative on the parents' part to do their research. Most any reasonably intelligent parent, I think, can support it and provide that support with the teacher's help. I think that is completely possible, and there's no basis of guarantee that your child will succeed whether or not you're a musician.
Right.
So it is determined within them, and you are there as their support. And there's also some benefits, I think, to being a musician parent, but also some benefits of not. It's interesting to consider that when you're as far removed from the big picture of the end of the road and what it takes to get there, you tend to pace yourself better, I think.
Yes.
You tend to be happier with simpler milestones and successes. Whereas if you are a professional musician, you can kind of just see how much longer they have to go and not be as celebratory about the little steps.
Yeah.
So
I grew up in a situation where my mom, while she was musical. I mean, she played the flute and band, and she, knew how to play the piano to an intermediate level, but she wasn't musical in the way that I wanted to be. She wasn't a professional musician. And I remember, there was a little bit of that where, because she wasn't a professional musician, she didn't even know what I wanted. Do you know what I mean? She didn't even know what that looked like. She didn't know what sort of teacher I needed. She didn't know what sort of practice or what sort of instrument or what sort of any of that. She didn't know any of that.
Right.
But she found all of that for me, and it took a little while for me to be able to communicate clearly enough what I wanted,
right?
Because I had to be at an age where I was like, no, I really want to go all the way with this. I don't want to just play the piano. I want to play the piano. I want to be a pianist. And so, she happened upon a music teacher for me. It's a really interesting story. I'll tell it sometime. And then, she would support in ways that she couldn't sit with me and practice. I mean, I was playing repertoire that was beyond her. And so she hired practice coaches for me.
Oh, wow.
She did things like, I had a very old upright grand piano that I was practicing on at my when she found a great teacher for me. The teacher was like, well, you can't really learn to do all of these nuances on a piano like that. And so while they were saving up to purchase a grand piano, she would drive me over to our local church building that had a grand piano at 5 a.m.
Wow.
And I would practice from 5 to 7 a.m. and she would sleep on one of the pews. She would just break a blanket and a pillow.
That's
she would
amazing.
Sleep and I would practice. And she would support, she would go with me to competitions, and she was there to support me in so many ways.
All the important
that
ways.
Weren't actual sitting and practicing with me.
Right.
And so, a parent of a musician, your role can be so many things. It doesn't have to be the practice coach. Like I said, she hired practice coaches for me until I learned how to do it on my own.
Right.
So, yeah. What do you do in order to prepare your child before their lesson? This is kind of interesting.
That is interesting. Yes, I think this is something that I am trying to be better about, is communicating the objectives.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. And that's something that I've asked the teacher to assist us in this transition for my daughter with her violin. And so she is very clear. She doesn't take as detailed notes as I do, but she will tell me what the objective is for each week. This week it is thumb and lane 1. This week it is, whatever it is that they're trying to work on with the technique. And then she'll also do micro goals with the pieces that she's working on. This kind of bowing in this passage, that's the goal for this week. Intonation in this passage, that's the goal for, these measures. She'll write one word above the bracket of measures. And so having the teacher assist with the objectives and then reminding the student throughout the week what those objectives are is the best way to prepare for the lesson, I think.
I feel like there's nothing to add to that.
Oh,
It's brilliant.
yeah.
I love it. I absolutely love
A
it.
recent win that we've had.
No, I think that's really, really great though. And I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about how I could apply this and practice at home, like being able to like even write the objectives down and show them like every day as they're practicing. Remember, these are your goals for the week. These are the things that you're specifically working on. So I love that.
Well, my daughter's in a quartet, and I'm trying, and she's sitting first violin in this quartet, and that's something that we actually attempted this last week. One really big win that she had, because she's, still young and learning how to take initiative especially with leadership. But she is I basically told her that of an objective for the group that the coach had mentioned about maybe, arriving at this certain chord together at the same rate of, retardando, etc. And I said, okay, your objective is to get 5 times where everyone is together, and you get to decide if it counts or not for one of the 5 times. And so they were all paying really close attention to whether or not they were together versus like, does the teacher say it's good enough? So it really does help a lot.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay. As an older student, how do you get the motivation to keep going when things get difficult?
This is so important for older students. Oh, you mean like adult students or like
I'm not
teenagers?
Sure, actually. So maybe we can talk about both.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
This is a very important conversation or thought process to think about for, I think, teenagers, because this is so relevant to other areas of life as an adolescent. I think that there's so much to learn from pushing through when things are difficult, because there's a lot of difficult things that we have to face in this life, especially as we're developing into these adult responsibilities. And there's nothing better for a teenager, I think, than to learn this.
Yeah.
So how to encourage them to is various ways. I think this belief that they can and that they're capable comes from a lot of positive self-talk, a lot of influences, confidence building environment, supportive family, good friendships, or a mentor. If a teenager does not have a really emotionally healthy family setup, I think there are ways to reach out to the community members to find someone who can uplift them, motivate them, and to challenge them or encourage them to challenge themselves. And that is just as important as the talent itself or development in terms of the skill. Just as important as the practice is that mentorship from someone. And a lot of times it can be the actual private teacher.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. And I think that this is kind of maybe an odd answer to this, but I think that sometimes reminding yourself where you've been can be incredibly helpful. Whether it's like thinking back through past performances or looking back through videos that you maybe have of yourself from earlier days, because I think sometimes like we are looking at this mountain that we have to climb and we forget how far we've already come.
Right.
And we forget all of the things that we were able to accomplish.
The perspective.
And remembering that perspective of, oh, I actually am so capable. I've been able to do so many incredible things.
Right.
And I've been able to get this far. Of course, I'm going to be able to keep making progress.
Right.
Even if sometimes I think in the moment, in those like day-to-day moments where we're practicing every single day, things can go so slow.
Right.
That we don't see the progress. And so I think it's helpful to remind ourselves, oh, wait, yes, progress has been made, over this last month. Look at all of these incredible things I've accomplished. So and that can be very motivating.
I think, yes, the journey in the past of documentation too, that can also serve as a motivator. Just 1 year ago, watching a video of the students' performance at that point can open up a lot of perspective too in this area.
Okay.
I love it.
This is an interesting one. I like this. And I have a very strong opinion on this.
All right, let's have it.
What do you think about the idea of not practicing, but a lot of playing?
Oh, yes. I
will tell you this, that my husband would say, he is totally in a lot of playing camp.
Yes.
And he was a trombone player, and he didn't have time to practice. He was on the football team. But he played, he played in all of these different bands. When he was in a small town, and he played in like the junior high band and the high school band and in the, college band, because everybody needed a trombone player.
Yes.
And so he was like, I never practiced, but I played so much that I learned all of these things about my instrument. And I'm sure he did.
I'm sure he did. Yeah.
So,
that's a valuable experience.
It is.
A different kind of practice.
That's
if you would say.
That's right.
Practice playing.
That's right.
Because any kind of playing that requires concentration and exertion is in facto practice.
That's right. I mean, really, truly, it's
practice in disguise.
That's right. I mean, he's playing in a organized way. He's not just like playing like
off,
crazy, goofing off. And I think there's so much to be said for. There's so many wonderful things that are born out of just playing around on your instrument. Like so many composition and improvisation and all of that. So there's the like one side of it.
Yeah.
But then the other side of it is, I mean, do you really achieve true mastery through just playing?
No, I think if it has some guidance, it counts as practice, whether it be internal based on a goal, that's practice. But if your question is just playing your favorite stuff, I mean, that can serve as a wonderful form of therapy.
Right.
It does serve that. But in terms of mastery of your instrument, I wouldn't say that's the best way to go about it. So it really does depend on your objectives.
That's right.
So.
All right. How can I nail a difficult passage that doesn't work, although I'm practicing in different rhythms and different, this is interesting. This is a very specific question.
I love this question.
But I like it too. So this last question is kind of interesting and super specific. How can I nail a difficult passage that doesn't work, although I'm practicing in different rhythms, etc.?
Yes. Okay, this is wonderful. I love this question. So anytime that you're experiencing any sort of mistakes or stumbling or a challenge, basically you have this valuable information about what's not there, about what you need to work on. Mistakes are teachers. We've always heard that from a lot of growth mindset teaching and coaching. When you're having a passage that's too hard for you, there's a lot of ways to dissect that. So you're trying different rhythms and it's not working. Well, what might be missing in addition to that? Do you have a foundational understanding of the scalar patterns? Are you as comfortable as you should be with the scales or arpeggiated figures or intervals or whatever you're experiencing in this passage? Are you performing or practicing with correct technique? Do you have a teacher who can help you identify what your homework is to get to that point? Oftentimes, we find ourselves, especially as very curious people, we tend to want to move forward faster than what our technique understanding is. And so even if we're trying some tips and tricks or hacks that we're seeing online, that only gets us so far if we're not filling in all of these holes that we experience. And there's no shame in going too far and realizing, I skipped over some things. Let's go back. And it's not that you can't still have fun with some repertoire, but maybe that passage needs to simmer a little bit until you get direction on how to build those foundational supports to help you arrive. Because when you're seamlessly able to get through technical passages with ease and with good technique and posture and all those things, it means that you have done all of the work that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I will tell my students, whenever you run into something like that, break it down.
Yes.
Go slower.
Yes, break it down, go slower. Stay slow for a long time.
Yeah, stay slow for a long time. And I think, I remember working on a specific Chopin etude once in college that my professor and I both thought that I would be fine with. And I got into it and we were like, after a couple of months, we were both like, nope, this isn't happening.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just being okay with that too, saying, not every piece is for every person. Know, as much as we want to say, oh, this is the thing that I really, really want to play right now. I think what you're saying about like making sure that you're not skipping any little things to get to that place where you can actually play that piece, that's really important. So if you have done all of the work, you've worked with a teacher, you've broken it down, you're going slow, you've done it in rhythms, you've done all of these things, and you're still not finding yourself able to be successful, putting it on the back burner for a while is not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea. So. No. And if you're finding yourself, oftentimes, I grew up in Texas, and there was this all-state competition where everyone in the state was assigned the exact same series of etudes, and there were various levels of ability and to accommodate these difficult pieces of music. And so oftentimes the tempo marking, they were pretty standard set. But oftentimes what I saw with my peers and with some students later down the road is that they would kind of abandon principles of rhythmic understanding or execution for the sake of a faster tempo. So I like the idea of not performing faster than you can play it well.
Yes, that's like one of the things that I try and talk to my students about all the time.
Yeah, so hard to do.
Never play faster than you can actually play it.
Yes, actually play it clean.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
all the expression there. Yeah,
absolutely.
I love it.
All right.
Wow, those are great questions. We really appreciate the feedback that we've received from our reaching out with this. We want to start conversations that relate to all of us and that connect us together. So we appreciate all the feedback. We would love more questions and requests. We're here to talk about all these things so that we can all learn and grow together.
Absolutely. Thanks for being with us today.
See you next time.